Flosstube, it's Helen D. Today we are going to do a start to finish basic pillow tutorial. I'm hoping to not edit anything out, to show you exactly how long it takes me to do a basic pillow. What I mean by basic is I'm just taking a stitched piece, I'm going to cut around it, sew it up, no trim, no extras. The basic pillow shape that then you could use to add on more things as you go. And my plan is to do more tutorials showing how to do those extra things, but we're starting with the very basic. Because I'm not editing, there will be times when I have to jump up and iron, and I may need to adjust the camera, so we'll do the best we can. So the piece that I'm doing, I should have grabbed the paper for. This is my sister's piece. I believe it was Needle Bling Designs, and I'm not sure if it's available because it was from a Halloween box. Here it is. It's called Frank in Stitches by Needle Bling Designs. So Donna stitched this up. It's on an Aida. Again, I don't know which one. It's on an Aida. So we'll go from there. So when I start with a pillow finish, the first thing I do was iron. So I have already ironed my piece. It's on a great big piece of fabric. I didn't cut it or anything. I just ironed it. There's nothing on the back yet. So I like to have my pieces with a little bit of fabric showing. But before I cut, I usually iron my interfacing on first. That way I don't need to worry about getting interfacing on my iron. I have some added protection. So I'm gonna flip this over to the back. Not that it really matters at this point. And I have my interfacing, and I'm going to try and maneuver my way in here. To cut this down. I like to use Pellon 950F, which is a little bit of a more heavyweight interfacing. I just find for me it gives it a little added padding, a little added stiffness, I guess, not padding. So I'm gonna lay this on there so that I'm on. I know full well I can't salvage any of this fabric, so I'm not too worried about getting interfacing on it that then is gonna get chucked. So I'm going to make sure it's over like at least an inch, and I'm just going to cut, making sure I'm not cutting my fabric underneath. I'm going to cut a strip of this off. Then I can go in and cut it the other way. So now I have a piece of interfacing that I'm going to iron right on there, and it goes over like an inch. So when you iron your interfacing on, there's a bumpy side and then there's a smooth side, and the bumpy side is the actual fusible part of the interfacing. So you want the bumpy side down to the back of your stitching. I also like to check at this point and make sure there are no long threads, like thread ends that I could snip off. That would show through. This is a dark fabric, so you'd have like this little bit of gray right here. That's not going to show through. But if it were a white fabric, I might just snip that a little shorter just to make sure nothing was going to show through. So I'm going to center this on and zip over to the iron and just press that down. Interfacing usually comes with instructions on it of what to do. Mine, I just looked, I was on a cotton setting and I had steam on. That may be against all the rules, but that's what I've found typically works best for getting it to stick down. So now that that is on there, I'm going to flip it over and trim it up. Like I said, I like to leave mine with a little bit of fabric showing and then enough room for a seam allowance. So what I found for me is 3/4 of an inch is my sweet spot. So I have my ruler, and this is a lined quilting ruler, so it has, like, this is 1 inch, and then it has all the 1/4 inches marked. So I know, and this one's nice because it has a nice straight border, if I line that up there so that that 1/4 inch mark is right on the top line of this stitching, that leaves 3/4 of an inch on the other side. So I'm going to line this up and then cut. You can cut by hand if you want to. You can cut with a fabric cutter. So now I'm going to flip it around and do the other long edge. Again, I'll line that up to 1/4 here, which leaves 3/4, and cut. Now I can salvage all of this fabric. Sometimes this you can pull off and still salvage. Then I'll do the same thing on the other small ends. And then I'm going to show you a trick for even weave and linen. Aida is nice because you can kind of go right by the holes and know that you're lining it up straight. So that's a bonus. So there is 3/4 inches all the way around with my interfacing on the back. Now the trick for Aida and even weave. When you measure, let's say, like I was going to cut off this little strip. If you take a pin, which I thought I left one out, if you take a pin and you mark, like I went right down in the hole where I would cut. Then you can, if you tuck under one thread, and I don't know how well you're going to be able to see that, I just tucked under one little linen thread, in this case even weave, and you tug it out. So now you have a little string. You can hold on to that, pull it, and it kind of bunches up your fabric. Then you kind of work that pull down, pull a little more, work it down, and it will pull. Ah, it snapped. Normally it will pull right out. Now I just have to find the end. So you can pull that right out, and what it does is it leaves you a nice line so that you know you can use your scissors and just cut right along that line, and that will be even. That will be an even amount of space away from your stitching. So I have my front, now I need my back. I went through, actually I didn't, Donna gave me this piece of fabric. This is what she wanted for the back. So again, I ironed it. I have not done anything else to it. I'm going to take this, line it up to figure out which way is going to be my best use of fabric, which in this case is just the short way here. I'm going to leave it a little bit bigger and just cut it right off. Now I'm going to take this piece and also do interfacing on the back of that. So this time I'm going to lay, because it's already cut, I'll lay that piece, again making sure nothing's under it. I've done that before. And I'm just going to trim up this interfacing to be the same size. And then I'll go press this on the bumpy side of the interfacing to the back side of my fabric. I have a very loud iron, so this one is done. This backing, luckily for me, the pattern is not super straight. You know, some of these are kind of, they go in a little, so if I'm not super straight with my sewing, you're not going to know. Keep that in mind when you're picking out your fabric, is if it's something that's really particular, it's going to give you a little more of a hard time. So I have my backing and I have my front. I'm going to flip it right over. I might trim it up just a little bit so I have less that I have to work with. But I'm not going to worry about it being the exact same size because I'm going to cut it after. So I'm going to use this measured distance to measure when I'm sewing, not the backing fabric. So now I'm going to take a couple of clips just to hold it in place. These are Wonder clips. They're great. You don't have to mess with pins. The whole thing's nice. So that will hold them together. My sewing machine, oh, you can't really see that. I'll have to zoom out when we're sewing. I have a very basic sewing machine. It's not fancy. It is a Brother band. It does 27 stitches. I've used 5 of them. So you don't need something super fancy to do these. You just need something that you're comfortable using. So I have my sewing machine. My foot, I know from where this hole is, that's where the needle is, to the end is 1/4 of an inch. So I know that if I line up the edge of this fabric that we measured with the edge of this foot, and that's where I sew, that I am sewing in 1/4 of an inch, which will then leave me 1/2 an inch of my fabric showing, which is what I want. So I have it all set up. I'm going to start on the bottom of my piece, which I can still see it through there. There's Frankenstein. About 1/3 of the way up. And then I'm going to sew my edges and stop about 1/3 of the way on this side. If you want to remind yourself, you could tuck a pin right in there so that you know, okay, that's where I'm starting, and when I get to here, that's where I'm stopping. I'm leaving myself enough room to turn it and to stuff it. So I'm not going to bother with the pin, but I'm going to put this on there. And I usually will sew right off the edge, cut my thread, go right down the other. And I do, when I'm going to start, I'll go back a little bit to lock it in, and I'll do the same on my edges. And if the table wiggles, it's because it's a folding table. That also is nothing fancy. So there's my first line. Again, I locked in this edge and I locked in that edge. Now I'm going to turn it and go right up this other side. Oh, it's going to give me a hard time. Sometimes my machine does not like my bobbins. So I had to just cut it off. It's messy, but once I fix it, you won't notice. I'm going to trim up my bits so I don't have a big blob right in the corner. Let's see what we can do over here. That's the other thing is, once you know your machine, It made a noise and I knew. I knew it was going to do that because, oh, I got tangled up here. That's how my machine works. Take two. All right, see, it happens to all of us. No worries. Hopefully it only happens once though. Put it in there. Okay. Take two, right on the edge. That off. Back down the other way. Oh, did it again. I'm switching bobbins. Let's see if it likes this one any better. They won't be the same color, but that won't matter either. Just gonna trim up these so they don't get in my way because they're really long. Take three. I had it the wrong way. So this is that bottom side where I only want to go down about a third. Okay. We're done with that, so we'll move it right out of the way. All right. So I'm just going to trim up my little bits, and then we'll actually trim the whole piece so they won't really, we had some long ones. Okay, so now I like to go in, here's the front, here's the back. You can tell, like, we have a lot of fabric up here. If I leave that much fabric when I'm trying to turn it, it makes the edges and the corners really thick. So I'm gonna go in and cut this down, I don't know, maybe an eighth of an inch. I'm just gonna lay this on there and cut some off. I can see through it to see where my sewing line is, so I know I'm not gonna cut over that. So I'll leave about that much. Do that on, I'll do that on my sides that I sewed all the way, not on the side with the open edge. The side with the open edge, I need to leave enough of the fabric to sew together when I'm turned it and I'm sewing up the bottom. So I'm just going to cut right along the edge of the interfacing of that front piece and cut off the extra from the back. So now you can see it's got a nice tight line here, but it's wider on the bottom. Then I'm going to go in and cut my corners. And I'm going to not cut the line, but I'm going to cut kind of right up to it. And again, this takes some of the bulk out of the corners. So now I have it trimmed up as much as I can, and I'm ready to turn it. You can use, I have a point turner, which is a quilting tool. Some people use a chopstick. Some people use the eraser end of a pencil. I have this, oh, what is this called? I don't remember what this is called. A bodkin, B-O-D-K-I-N. It's for pulling elastic through something. That's really handy. Just something that you can get these corners. So I just pick one, no rhyme or reason, and start to kind of twist it out and turn it around. And then once I get all the sides, I'll go in there with my point turner and really try to pop those corners out a little bit. Gently, but just try and pop those out. And then before we stuff, I will go over to the iron and just press this down. All right, I pressed it down and I tried to turn my edges in and iron them down while I was over there just to get a nice edge on them. So now the stuffing. I like to use cleaning up all these little bits so they don't end up stuffed in my pillow. I like to use Mountain Mist Fiberfill. My bag looks like this. Mountain Mist Fiberloft. This is the one that Vonna Pfeiffer recommended when I first started making pillows, and it's the one I've had the best luck with. So I'm going to pull out a whole big wad of it, because it's going to take a lot, and just set it up here. And you're like, that's not all going to fit in there. Wait and see. The thing I do before I start with my Fiberfill that I found is really helpful for keeping my edges, my corners, The Fiberfill, I feel like once it's in there, you think you've got it, and then it kind of squishes its way back out. So I like to take yarn, regular old cheap yarn, and I'm going to pull out, I don't know, 3-4 feet. And what I've been doing lately is I've got it kind of doubled. I'm just going to cut it into little sections. I don't know, an inch, inch and a half. I'm going to cut the whole thing up. I'm going to do that again for the other top corner. And the Fiberfill shoves the yarn up in place, and then the yarn kind of stays. So that's what I've had. I've been doing it this way for several years. Sometimes I just wad the yarn up, but I found that if I cut it up, it stays even better. Like it stayed pretty good. Just wad it up. But why not get it the best you can? Okay. So I've got 2 piles. Then I'm going to take my first little bit of Fiberfill and just fluff it up and get a couple of little pieces ready to go. So I have my pillow. I'm going to start from the bottom. This is a long skinny one. I'm going to do kind of one of the top corners, stuff, the other top corner, and then work my way down. This is the part that once I get going, it's just going to take a while. You may want to jump ahead. So I'm going to take my big wad of yarn and just shove it down in one of those corners. Just with my finger. And then I'm going to take one of these little sections to put right on top of it to kind of really hold it into place. Take my point turner and really poke it down in there. Okay. So then I can start taking my Fiberfill and filling in that top area. So I'll put a bunch in. I'll set these over here, they're going to get all messed in. So I'll take a bunch, fluff it up, get it ready, and then I can just kind of grab sections. And the fluffing up really kind of stretches it out and makes it fill in better. So I'm just going to start stuffing away. Actually, on this long skinny one, I changed my mind. I'm going to do the other bottom corner first. So there goes all my yarn. Just a little bit of Fiberfill. Get that down in there. So now I can start filling in that end. Now another tool that I've had really good luck with lately is something a lot of people I think have. My friend bought me one of these measurers for measuring your floss so that all your flosses are the same length when you stitch. This is fantastic for stuffing pillows because it's kind of two-pronged, so it works really well to kind of jam all that stuffing down in there. So I'm stuff. Now again, it's going to take a while. When I get about to the halfway point, I'll turn it around and do those other 2 corners. Now, some things that I'm looking for as I stuff is sometimes I feel like you can get like a low spot that then I want to go in with one of my pokers and really kind of work it in there. And sometimes you can kind of fiddle it up in the back to really jam it in there. the more stuffing you get in, the tighter and fuller your finish you can get. If that's the look you're going for. If you're going for sawdust, you'd be doing this a whole different way. Or walnut shells. But this is how I do my polyfill pillows. Okay, I've almost reached the corner here because now it's going to start popping out. Okay, going to cut some more yarn for the other edges. Take a pile of this, flip it over and start on the other side. Get in there. Stuck to me. A little pinch to hold it in place. Kind of mixes in, I think, a little bit with the yarn. Get it all down in there. Okay, do that last side. That yarn tried to get away from me. Okay, so now I can start filling it on this side. And you'll think you have a spot good, and then you shove it in and you're like, oh, now I have a whole dent down here I need to worry about. Getting there. I think I've got a soft spot right there, so I'll really push this up. But my corners feel pretty good. They all feel nice and stuffed. So now it's just this middle section. Working away on my pile of stuffing. So down here around the edge, I usually just use my finger and really poke it down in there. All right, almost. Just this edge. So then the next thing that I do, typically what I've started doing before I sew the edge up, I go over to the iron and I've been ironing my piece. I used to do this when I was all the way done, but then I would find that right around the hole where I sew it up, I wouldn't have enough stuffing. So I've started kind of doing it a little early, and that way if I need to add a little more stuffing while I'm sewing it, I can. So I'm gonna call that. Okay, so I'm gonna poke this in as much as possible so that it doesn't get all over my machine. And I'm gonna go over to my iron, and I wish I could set up there to show you, but you wouldn't be able to see. I'm going to take this, and that iron is still on a cotton setting with the steam. It's been on this whole time. I'm gonna lay it down on the back and just press the iron right on it. And what it does is it melts the fiberfill a little and really flattens it down and solidifies everything. So I just need to keep this stuff, again, poked in so that it doesn't melt all over my iron. And sometimes I will flip it over and even do this side if you're worried about your stitches. I have like just a piece of white fabric or a cheesecloth that you could lay over there to just really squish those out. Okay, now it's a little toasty. So, like I said, I just pressed the iron, I flipped it over, I put my cloth on, I really gave it a good press, and you can see that it flattened it out, and it's stuffed. I had to keep poking this stuff in, again, just to keep it from melting all over my iron. So I'm going to leave this up here because I may need a little more of it when I close this up. I'm going to grab a needle. Typically, I would use a color that's close to your fabric, but I know that eventually I will put trim on this, so I'm not too concerned. And I don't have anything that matches this green fabric, so I grabbed a brown. That's what was up there. So I'm going to make mine so that I can loop start, so I have both of my ends that I'll thread in there. And then I have the open down on the other side. Let's see if we can zoom you in a little. So to close up the hole, I'm going to start on the fabric side. And I'm just going to kind of dip into my fabric a little bit so that then I can go through with my loop start and attach my thread. So then I'm just going to take, I guess it's a ladder stitch, where you just take kind of a little bite of one side, pull it through, and then a little bite of the other side, and pull it through. And then when you pull these together, it kind of closes it up. Mine's not very neat already. That's why I use a lot of trim, you guys. I'm also not using my favorite needle because it's really small. And bent. I know some people get rid of like their bent needles, but I'm like, that's my favorite needle. It's bent just how I like it. So I'm just going to close this up all the way. When I get down to like an inch left, I'm going to need to shove some more interfacing in there. Not interfacing, stuffing. So I'm kind of keeping them a little loose, and then I'll pull them a few at a time. So I hope this was helpful. My plan is, like I mentioned, to now do a little series of tutorials of what you can do from here. How to do some different trims, or what you can do to add on to the front before you get to this point. I'm just stuffing some more in here as I go. Always seems to be the area that doesn't get enough. So here I'm going to just give those a little pull and come right through. A little bit more of this. This time I'm going to use that bodkin because it's even skinnier to really slide that down in there. And then when I'm all the way done and tied off my thread, I'll go back over to the machine and give it one final iron, especially on this corner, to get that stuff down in there. All right, I think all right, last stitch. So to end my thread, typically what I do is I'll go kind of like we did at the beginning. I'll kind of take just a little bite of the fabric, pull through, go through my loop, and make a knot. And I might do that twice. I'll go through another little, just a little bite, go through my fabric, tie it off. And then I like to go, take my needle, poke it right in and come out kind of in the fabric, because that way when I pull it through, it pulls that knot down a little, and when I snip it, all my extra thread is in the pillow. So let me give this a little iron and we'll be done. Frank's Needle Workshop is now open for business. So that is a basic pillow form. I can now take this and add on trim. The only time I do my personal finishes differently is if I'm doing a cording trim and I want to hide the edge. I will show you that trick when I record that video. So for now, this one is ready. I think I'm going to do some pom-poms on the edge and then it will be done. Thank you.